If the bell jar feels unsettling from the very first page, it's because the novel begins with a fracture, a split between the glamorous New York summer everyone else sees and the private horror show going on inside Esther's mind. Sylvia Plath doesn't open with fashion or excitement, but with the electrocution of the Rosenbergs. The dissonance is the point. Esther is already living in two realities at once: the polished American dream surface and the darkness underneath. This early clash establishes the novel's central theme: Esther's fractured identity, the divided self who cannot merge her inner world with the image she believes she must project. She judges everything around her with brutal clarity, but she turns that same gaze inward, and what she sees is coming apart. Then Plath drops a quiet bombshell. Esther already has a baby. In the middle of describing her glamorous internship, she casually mentions her child playing with the plastic starfish from her old sunglasses case. Suddenly we realize the whole novel is a recollection. An adult woman looking back on the moment herself began to crack. The split is emotional and temporal. And notice Plath's language: short, abrupt paragraphs, blunt imagery, violent clarity. The narration feels like shards of memory, vivid, sometimes gruesome. A Salinger mood. But something is off. Critic Robert Taubman famously called The Bell Jar the first feminine novel in a Salinger mood. And it's true. Esther's voice often resembles Holden Caulfield's: young, sharp, cynical, funny, and brutally judgmental. She judges everyone. Frankie, Hilda the hatmaker, even Doreen. She's not a gentle narrator. She tells us exactly what she thinks, even when it's cruel. But unlike Salinger's world, Plath places Esther against dominant 1950s American culture. The novel opens with the Rosenbergs' execution. The space meant for success and opportunity is instead filled with death, punishment, and electrocution. Ethel Rosenberg becomes an eerie symbolic double, an intelligent woman punished with electricity just as Esther will be. Meanwhile, it's 1953, and Esther is in New York on what should be a dream apprenticeship at a fashion magazine. Outwardly, she looks like an all-American success story. Internally, she says, "I didn't know what I was doing in New York, and I knew something was wrong with me that summer." She thinks she should be happy, and she isn't. And structurally, the split deepens: Esther in the past and Esther in the future with a baby. Two timelines, one fractured self. Esther in New York, glamour versus collapse. So, who is Esther Greenwood? She's brilliant, hardworking, scholarship-dependent, a perfect American dream success story. But internally, she's burned out, anxious, and exhausted. She constantly wants to be alone, in bed, in the bathroom, wandering the streets. Her German background isolates her further in post-war America. She feels like she's faking everything, pretending to study physics, pretending she belongs in glamorous spaces. Her relationship to beauty culture is also fractured. She loves fashion and commodities but feels hurt by them. She doesn't critique the system. She just suffers inside it. Betsy, Doreen, and Elly Higginbottom split selves everywhere. At the Amazon, Esther's fractured identity appears in physical form: Betsy and Doreen. Betsy is the wholesome, good girl, blonde, sweet, conformist, cover girl material. Doreen is glamorous, decadent, sarcastic, worldly, unapologetically sexual. These two women map cleanly onto Esther's divided self. She admits, "It was Betsy I resembled at heart, but her cynicism and sharpness mirror Doreen." She doesn't belong fully to either girl. They both draw and repulse her. And then comes Elly Higginbottom, the false name she gives at a party. When Doreen calls her Elly, and the maid calls her Miss Greenwood, Esther says it felt as if I had a split personality or something. Already the novel shows doubling everywhere: Betsy Doreen, Esther Elly, wholesome/decadent. Appearance/reality. Purity, contamination, and the good girl versus bad girl split. Baths and purging become symbols of Esther's desire to be pure. After drinking with Doreen, she takes a scorching bath, purifying herself. After food poisoning, she vomits violently and then feels strangely blissful, saying clean again. It resembles an early form of bulimic logic: binge, purge, moral reset. And it mirrors her sexual anxiety. Virginity feels less like innocence and more like a burdensome moral performance. She hates the double standard. Buddy can have affairs, women must stay pure. One part of her wants to be sexually free, another part wants to be spotless. Buddy Willard and the fig tree, too many selves, not enough life. Buddy Willard represents the life Esther is expected to choose, and the life she rejects. Everyone assumes she'll marry him. He's the Yale pre-med golden boy, respectable and conventional. But Esther begins seeing him differently. She finds him literal-minded, pedantic, always explaining things, dismissive of poetry as a piece of dust. She begins to feel intellectually above him. Then his hypocrisy surfaces. He had a long affair with a waitress while pretending to be pure. He acted shocked by female sexuality while enjoying sexual freedom himself. That double standard is everywhere. Mrs. Willard's "a man is an arrow into the future" speech, Esther's mother sending her in defense of chastity, arguing that women must remain pure. Esther refuses it. She won't be the place the arrow shoots off from. She won't learn shorthand, becoming a man's secretary while he lives an exciting life. And then comes the fig tree, every fig a different possible life. Writer, wife, mother, traveller, lover, academic. She wants all of them but believes she must choose only one. So she sits, paralysed, starving under the tree, watching possibilities drop and rot. She is paralysed not because she has no options, but because she has too many. Buddy becomes the symbol of the narrow, predictable, socially approved path she refuses. Yet she also can't fully embrace the opposite extremes. She doesn't want to be the bad girl or the Doreen-type rebel. And that's the heart of the fracture. Esther cannot fit into any single female role the culture offers her. Mind versus body. I am, I am, I am. As depression deepens, Esther splits between mind and body. She tries to hang herself, her hands slip. She tries to drown, her body floats. She overdoses, her heart keeps beating. I am, I am, I am. Her body insists on life while her mind begs for release. She can't sleep, read, or write. She sobs at her father's grave. She can't recognize her own face. She stops bathing, stops eating, throws away her clothes, behaves almost like a ghost. She explains little about why she wants to die. Only how. This is the most literal fracture in the novel. Her body wants to live. Her mind wants to stop existing. Mirrors, Marco's blood, and not recognizing herself. Mirrors appear everywhere, and they always show a broken or alien self. In the elevator door, she sees a big, smudgy-eyed Chinese woman. In JC's office, she looks like someone peering out of a prison cell. After Marco smears blood across her dress, she keeps wearing it detached from her own appearance. In the hospital mirror, she sees a shaved head and bruises, a supernatural conglomeration of bright colours. She doesn't recognize herself until the reflection smiles back. Then the mirror slips and shatters. With each mirror, her identity fragments a bit more. She becomes stranger, victim, patient, anyone except herself. Doctors, shock therapy, and the bell jar. The medical world mirrors Esther's fracture. Dr. Gordon is handsome, polished, uninterested, the perfect image of 1950s professionalism. Esther despises him. He administers shock therapy harshly, without preparation. She wonders, what terrible thing had I done? The echo of the Rosenbergs is unmistakable. Intelligent woman, electricity, punishment. Later, Dr. Nolan, intuitive, perceptive, female, becomes the doctor Esther had imagined. Her treatment is gentler, restorative. Even psychiatry splits. Punitive versus humane, male versus female, artificial versus intuitive. Then comes the bell jar itself. Esther trapped under glass, breathing her own sour air, cut off from life. She feels like the pickled fetuses in Buddy's medical jars, observed, pitied, not fully alive. After treatment, the bell jar lifts, but it still hovers. It may descend at college, in Europe, somewhere, anywhere. The bell jar is the symbol of a self that cannot connect, not to others, not to her body, not to her reflection. Joan, Irwin, and burying one, self to save another. Joan is Esther's clearest double. They share Buddy, college, the hospital, even mirror image rooms. Then there's Irwin. Esther sleeps with him not out of passion but calculation. Virginity feels like a burden she wants gone. The bleeding afterward becomes another purging, another death of a good girl version of herself. Ending, anti-coming of age. What caused Esther's breakdown? The novel resists one answer. Maybe it's her father's death and her mother's denial of grief, her mother's inability to understand her pain, the pressures of class mobility and academic success, the narrow roles available to women in the 1950s, sexual double standards, cultural misogyny. It may simply be that the world is unstable and Esther can't pretend it's fine. Her rebellion is both personal and structural. Even losing her virginity is a rebellion, carefully planned, not emotional. By the end, she hasn't found a career or identity or man. She has a fragile recovery. The bell jar lifts, but doesn't disappear. The final image, Esther walking into a room where doctors will decide her future, underscores how unfinished everything is. Is this a coming-of-age story? In one sense, yes, first job, first proposal, first sex, first breakdown. But it is also an anti-coming-of-age story, a regression into illness and a tentative return. And yet, the older narrator is a mother holding a baby, suggesting she eventually lives a life that includes domesticity, but perhaps on different terms. Final reflection, Plath's rush, and the wish for gentleness. The bell jar is fiction, but it's impossible not to feel Plath behind it. She wrote it in her late 20s, already married, already a mother, already racing through life at incredible speed. The pressure she placed on herself to excel, publish, be brilliant, be the perfect wife and perfect mother feels breathless. On every page of the bell jar, there's an urgency, as if she didn't believe she had time. I keep wondering what might have happened if she had lived long enough to grow into a different understanding of life. If she had been older, maybe she would have seen that domestic life can hold its own quiet beauty. Maybe she would have felt that children, far from being burdens, can be blessings. Maybe she would have discovered that identity is something you build slowly, not something you must perfect in your 20s. When I finish the bell jar, I feel admiration, but also mourning, not only for Esther but for Plath herself. I wish she could have offered herself the gentleness she so desperately needed, that she could have known she didn't have to rush, that there was time, that she could become a writer, a mother, and a whole self, gradually, imperfectly, at her own pace. And maybe that's an unexpected message the novel leaves us with. Even the most fractured selves deserve patience. Survival has nothing to do with speed. And it's perfectly okay for your life and your identity to unfold slowly. I only wish Sylvia Plath had been given the time to learn that too.